people have the values, they don't have the knowledge. So you have to find, it's always a guess, but I think you should start where you can find people. I think in Europe we have everything. We have talents, we have good connectivity, we have an interesting market. It's harder to start in Europe because, of course, we don't speak the same language. But you know, when we did NetVibe and we did the same for Jolly Cloud, you could just put online, we did a database of all the words that are used on our application, and people can crowdsource the translation. So you can actually translate your product very fast. If you're doing an e-commerce site, it's difficult because it's more like you have to be on every country. But if you do a software-based company, you should go global and then translate very easily. I don't think it's the biggest problem. The biggest problem today in Europe is then when you have a critical size. And I experienced that with NetVibe. We were like very big, we were going very well, but we end up being 50, and then what's next? Do we go for the big thing, or do we stay a medium, small size company? And today, unfortunately, we don't have big acquisitions, or we don't have the ability to grow extremely big companies. So I think the model today in Europe is not Google, because every time we talk with politics, they say, how do we do the next Google in Europe? But the truth is you can't. Because today, if you want to do Google, you have to hire 20,000 people in 10 years in technology. And I don't know who can do that today. But you can do companies like Spotify that are a mid-sized company, 300 people, 200 in Sweden. I went to visit Daniel, the founder of Spotify in Sweden. It's unbelievable. They're going after iTunes from Europe. And they're already doing great stuff in Europe. And the only reason they can be in the US is because Apple is trying to do everything they can to stop them. That's pretty cool, actually. It means that when we want to do product and when we want to go after the big thing, we can. So I think companies of mid-size like Spotify should be the right model for Europe.
So it's interesting you bring up Apple. So Apple, 2 days ago, I think, or a few days ago, just announced iCloud. And there's a huge potential revolution in the computer hardware industry as a consequence of cloud computing. How do you see that whole world changing over the next 5 years? I think you're deep in it. For a lot of us, we see these terms and we're not sure exactly what they mean and what they entail. I'm just wondering, where do you think it's all going?
Yeah, so when I was talking about this dream when I was a kid, one of the things I wanted to do is to build a computer company like Apple or Sinclair or Commodore. I'm sure some of you remember, familiar with these brands back in the days. And so we did actually our own computer. So we went sourcing the component in China. We went to do the production, try to do everything. And I discovered that the hardware business is corrupted. The hardware business is basically, and especially Apple, who is extremely good at doing these little toys. The last thing we need is more computers, because until you see how we build computers, who is building computers, who is building iPods, how we build them, what's the footprint of building computers, then you start thinking hardware is a terrible business.
So what do you mean by that? Is it a monopoly business? Do Apple have too much control?
Apple has a lot of control. Apple has a control on the supply chain. It's very difficult today for a company. Think about Motorola, for example. They announced the first Android tablet with the new Android. The price of the Motorola was about $900, so it's like $400 more than the Apple one. And the reason is simple, is that they cannot produce a tablet as cheap as Apple. And why? Because Apple owns all the supply chain. And even when the factories don't work for Apple, they actually can't work for the competition. Think about LG, who does this amazing screen of Apple. They can't even sell it under their own name. Samsung was building pretty much half of I would say 60% of the iPad is designed by Samsung. Has to deliver the memory to Apple. When Apple launched a new product, the memory price just goes to the roof. It's like the oil business. It's completely crazy, the power they have. So they own the innovation of building. And it's the reason why we went to software, because building today is a monopoly. There's few companies who own that market. There's no innovation. You wonder why all the computers are they look like crap. They're all like sad, and except Apple, who has his own design facility. So the only innovation today is in the software. It's where you can do really cool stuff. And in the cloud, because the cloud is cheap. The cloud is actually an opportunity for companies like us to do with 10 people what companies like Google did with 100 or 200 people 10 years ago.
Great, fantastic. Tariq, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just to say that Tariq, one of his passions is just talking to entrepreneurs, and he'll be joining all the other speakers afterwards in the networking area. So hopefully you'll join him there. Thank you very much, Tariq.
Thank you for having me here.